morning. Thank you for joining us on the Win Show. I'm delighted to have with me Joe Salamone from the Long Island Bullying Coalition. You got to tell me how you got started with being a part of this. Can I tell you, it's a wonderful organization. How'd you get started?
I was a bullied kid, predominantly 6th grade through the better part of 11th. Wow. I moved from North Babylon to Deer Park in the summer before 6th grade. When I got into 6th grade, I walked into a school that I didn't know anybody. Mm-hmm. You know, I had been there once on a tour just before school started, but there were no kids in it, so I knew the layout basically, but I had never, really met the majority of the kids. So right away I got labeled the new kid. And it was, the physical bullying, the verbal bullying, easy target because nobody knew me. I was quiet, I was shy, and in varying degrees it got worse as the years progressed. There were good days, there were bad days, there were even worse days. Wow. They would take my stuff my backpack on the bus, and they would dump it throughout the bus, and then I'd have to go clean it up. Trying to get pushed into lockers, my gym clothes stolen from me, so things like that. So fast forward to 2013, I was sitting in the waiting room of Good Samaritan Hospital and in the emergency area, and I had a group of kids sitting to my left who openly started mocking a special needs individual when he walked in with people who I would expect were his parents. And the hand gestures, the verbal slurs, stuff like that, the mocked speech, and nobody did anything, including me. And they ended up moving to another area of the waiting room, but I said, I could either get really, really angry and make a scene, which probably wouldn't have changed anything other than getting myself into trouble, or I could try to figure out a way of bringing some positive, consequences to what I saw. And so I called some friends and some family and said, listen, I have a crazy idea, the Long Island Coalition Against Bullying is what it was, and they became the board, and 5 years later, here we are.
That's awesome. Wow. So how do you define bullying? I understand what you said, but how do you define it though?
I think there are three important things that are really staples to what is textbook bullying. The first one is there's got to be an intent to cause harm. Okay. Then there has to be repetition. There's got to be an ongoing, it doesn't have to be daily, but it has to be on a regular basis. And then the third thing is there has to either be a real or a perceived imbalance of power. Okay. And I say real or perceived because real could be an age difference. It could be, obviously along with age, it could also be grade level difference. An 8th grader to a 6th grader. It could be, and it could be perceived, if it's the popular kids in school, popular versus less popular. You could be in the same grade, in the same age, but there is a perceived imbalance of power there. So I think when you have all three of those things, or even really two of the three, you definitely are dealing with textbook examples of bullying. And we are defining it on almost on a daily basis, because there's a definite conversation going on these days where bullying is overly used. There's definitely a degree of difference between unkind behavior and bullying. We need to face facts. Kids are going to be kids, and they're going to be nasty and mean to each other at times. But there's a difference between calling somebody fat. It's not appropriate. We wouldn't want to see that happen. It's rude. It's not something you should say. But if it was calling somebody that on one day because the person was in a bad mood or whatever, again, wrong. But if they never spoke to each other again after that, that's not a bully. A bully would return the next day or, at some other point and do it again. So I think it's very important to understand the difference between what's unkind behavior and what's bullying. Unkind behavior can quickly become bullying, but there is definitely a difference between the two.
Wow. It's interesting as you were talking, I literally, I'm a lot older, but I went through that in high school. I was a very quiet kid. I didn't, in probably elementary school too, I didn't see at that time, this is like way back, I never saw it as bullying. We saw it as just, kids just being mean and they're bothering you. But now my grandson went through that in his district, and we had gotten a call that a bunch of kids wanted to fight him because they were jealous because he's an egghead. So they say, eggheads, they call it egg, but he's very, very smart. he's like far exceeds. And these kids waited for him after school, and they wanted to fight him. And literally, they would taunt him. And I think that's sort of what you're saying. It's the taunting. It's the constant, everyday taunting. And when the father came up there to meet with my son-in-law, thank goodness he was the kind of parent that wanted to get involved to make it right. But what do you do when you have a parent that actually doesn't want to make, not, I don't want to say they don't want to make it right, but there's a challenge there. Because, you know, you just have some parents that may not agree that their child is a bully.
Sure. More often than not, it's because they're afraid of where that conversation may lead. More often than not, a bully is doing the actions that he or she is doing in a way of coping with things in their own life. And the problem is when you open the door to the idea that they're coping with something they're struggling with, then the conversation leads to what are they struggling with? What are the causes of that struggle? It could be domestic violence in the home, in which case no parent is going to want that light shine on there. Right. The mirror can be a wonderful thing and it could be a dangerous thing. Right. And a lot of people don't like to look in it. So I could understand why parents may not want to right away embrace the idea, and it's definitely a problem when you're dealing with a family like that for both reasons. One, because they won't be a participant in helping change the behavior, right? But also because bullying can sometimes be a cry for help, like we mentioned, and if you're trying to cry out for help in your own way, granted bad behavior, but definitely a cry out. And you don't want to acknowledge that it might be because of what's going on, you're also not willing to deal with the fact that they may need help and this may be the way they're asking for it. And by not wanting to admit that they're a bully, it could really mean that you don't want to see that there's something going on that they may need help with.
Right. How does bullying escalate? I guess that's what I'm thinking. There was on the news, I think you might even know the story in the Bronx, because I work in the Bronx, where in high school, and the particular person actually stabbed another kid because he was being bullied. How did it get to that point?
I think it just builds and builds and builds.
Okay.
In my own case, thankfully I never brought a weapon to school, but I did not react. Right. I let it, I just kept taking it every day and taking it every day, and it, for me, having lived in it, I can see how it can get to that point. Which makes this a relevant conversation in what's going on with the world now with the violence in schools, because I think the statistic is that a bullied individual is twice as likely to bring a weapon of some kind to school. The overwhelming majority of school shootings that happened in the 90s were done at the hands of kids with documented histories of being bullying victims. So it's, and I'm not trying to lay it completely at that, because there's a whole mental health aspect that goes into this, but when they feel like they've reached the point where enough is enough, they can't do it anymore. When the mind is pushed to its max, what it's capable of doing it can be a little scary. So what somebody doesn't perceive as the breaking point for somebody, all I did was call them stupid. Well, you know what? Maybe that was the last thing that just, that one gentle little thing that you perceived as not a big deal could have been what destroyed their world, which again feeds into the mental health part of this whole thing. But it can escalate very quickly, and that's why I think it's important that when we see examples of it, where we're keyed into when it could become bullying, and when it is bullying, we're even more keyed in on disengaging the behaviors.
Cyberbullying, what's that?
Any method of technology to bully somebody else. And it's definitely what we discuss more often these days because of the rise in it, and it's definitely become the more prevalent. But just for the record, it hasn't replaced the traditional verbal and physical bullying. And I've spoken to kids and to families who will say just that, I feel like the emphasis is on cyberbullying, and but meanwhile my kid's still getting tripped in the hall and pushed on the bus and hit. So all of them are still happening, but cyberbullying is definitely the more prevalent form. And it's more difficult to tackle because, going back to my own history, the worst day in school for me was when I would have something happen to me in school or on the bus and kids were around to see it and whoever they told.
Right.
Today,
Right.
something could happen like it happened to me where my backpack would get dumped on the bus, but now it's videoed and it's tweeted and it's
social
Instagrammed
media.
and it's wherever
That's
it goes.
so true. Right.
And then it creates an ability and an environment where you can't hide from it anymore. I could leave school, get on the bus, and I knew that as soon as I got to the bus stop, I could run in the house, shut the door, and at least until the next day, it was over. There's no way of making it stop now, which is why it keeps it a constant thing. And it could, I shared a post the other day on Facebook. It got 500 likes in a day. It was great. But now it's a week and a half later, and people are still sharing it. And, so things like that don't die, and that was for a good reason. Point. When kids want to share something because they think it's, it's whatever their motives for doing it is, it never goes away. Thankfully, more social media platforms like Facebook, they're becoming better at taking things down quicker if it definitely violates their terms of use. But the funny thing is now is that more kids are moving off of Facebook. Facebook was popular, but now kids are on Facebook, but they don't really use it.
Really? Interesting.
They've trended more towards the Instagrams, the Snapchats, things like that. So cyberbullying is a huge problem.
Right. I've seen on several posts on Facebook where kids have committed suicide because they've been bullied. So we're going to take a commercial break, and when we come back, I want to talk about that a little bit because some of the kids are young, like Jaden that was just here. He's 8 years old, going to be 9. What happens to a child's mind where they feel the only way out is to check out?
Yep.
So we're going to talk about that when we return. Stay tuned for the rest of Dealing with Bullying on The Win Show. We've been having a great discussion, even during the break. We left off by talking about cyberbullying, which I was saying to you even was posted on Facebook of kids that have committed suicide based on being bullied. You yourself gave us the story of being bullied. One of the things I wanted to talk about, and during the break we talked about it, do you go out to schools and conferences and bring the message to the people? And I love what you said is that if you could reach that one person, it's worth it all. Can you kind of talk about that a little bit?
Sure. When we first started, everybody asked me, well, what's your goal? I said, if we can help one person, then we've met our goal. Yeah. Because if we could know that one person was, the message reached them, or we were able to do something for them that, helped them, even in the smallest way, that's what we're here to do. Our goals are small, but they're monumental at the same time,
Yes, they are.
It is unfortunate the numbers of suicides that we're seeing more and more. Bullying is usually a part of it. I won't ever say that it's the only thing and the only reason. It's what we usually call a precipitating factor. There are a lot of other things that are going on there, mental health issues. But like I said, bullying, what one person doesn't consider to be a big thing, could be something that's life-altering for somebody else. When we go out to do workshops and stuff, we do an exercise, an empathy exercise called the Invisible Backpack. The Invisible Backpack is anything, we all have them. Everybody in this room right now is wearing a backpack. Everybody listening to us is wearing a backpack. It's filled with all of the things that we as people are struggling with in our everyday life. But it's invisible because you can't see my backpack and what I'm struggling with, and I can't see yours. So when, it works both ways. It helps a bully understand what the victim is going through because what we do is we take a backpack and we fill it up with heavy bricks. And we make them wear it empty, but then we just add brick by brick by brick, and they feel it getting heavier. And then we add a bigger brick that we call bullying, and they watch it get that much heavier. So when you are constantly adding weight to what they're already carrying, that's when
powerful.
you can reach a breaking point.
That's
and
powerful.
conversely,
That's very
from
powerful.
the side of the victim, the bully sometimes feels like what's in their backpack is getting lighter the more they bully and demean somebody else. So we put the heavy backpack on them, and then with every nasty word or action they do, we take the weight off the bag to kind of make them understand why. Now, of course, it's not factually true, but it's what they think. It's the perception that the backpack's getting lighter. So, unfortunately, bullying does often contribute to why somebody may choose to unfortunately make the drastic decision of taking their life, which is part of what we were talking during the break. If we've ever, how many success stories we've heard.
Yeah.
And I'm very happy and humbled to hear that we've had many.
That's beautiful.
One of the biggest things that we do is, if we know somebody who's struggling, we always recommend that they talk to a therapist.
Okay.
Because that prevents you from getting the point of no return. When you're able to talk about the issues that are bothering, and you can learn different ways of coping, and you can learn the importance of yourself, and you can learn that you're stronger than you think you are. That all helps from talk therapy and other things, but talk therapy definitely helps. Not only will we refer them to a therapist in their area, but we will also pay for the first 5 sessions that they go to.
That's beautiful.
Just because I never want to hear that money was why they couldn't go, even if all they do is go for the 5. In most psychology circles, they will pretty much agree that between the first 3 and 5 sessions is a crisis intervention point.
Okay.
So that's why we went with 5. We didn't think 3 was enough. And just from a budgetary purpose, we can't afford to put everybody through long-term therapy. But if we were able to just gift them the crisis intervention part, you may be able to, diffuse a situation there.
Wow.
And we have heard from many kids and their families that, that it's helped. And, sometimes we do nothing other than just have somebody sit on the phone and listen to what's happening. And at the end of the conversation, parents will tell us, thank you. I feel so much better just being able to talk to somebody. We are completely impartial. We have no skin in their personal game other than we want to help them out. So we don't come to the table or come to the phone with any preconceived notions about the situation, who's telling right and wrong. So it can be that in itself can be therapeutic, talking to people, just getting it out. So I'm very happy to say, and very proud to say that we do have our success stories.
That's excellent. As you were talking, I thought about my own life and how going through different things I've gone through, it caused me to have a purpose to want to help young girls and women, and reinforcing to them that they can be empowered to become great women and their value system. When you got to the point where you would not take it anymore, what did you do?
It took a long time to get to that point. There are still times that when I talk about it, my mom still finds out, even now, it's almost 20 years later.
Wow.
Things that she only just found out now that she didn't know were happening then. I never told her that when I went into the 9th grade, I was going to, I had made the determination that if the next 4 years were going to be like the last 3, I wasn't ready for it. I couldn't do it.
Wow.
And I had started making, the preparations. I was making lists of things that I considered to be valuable possessions and who I might want to give them to, and I was gearing up for that. Unfortunately, I got to that point. Fortunately, in my case, I had a teacher who, on the 2nd day of school, just noticed something, and she's like, you need to come down after school. I'm like, oh God, I'm in trouble already. It's only like the 2nd day of school.
Right.
And she's like, you need to join my yearbook staff. I'm like, who does yearbook? But it was getting involved with a whole group of kids that actually wanted me to be around, and she was watching me and taking me. That changed the trajectory. And I'm still here. And that teacher, I still talk to her several times a week.
Beautiful.
She didn't know what she did until 2 years ago when we named her our gala honoree, and I told her that this is the reason why. So it took me a long time to get to the point of where I figured I couldn't do this. I couldn't take it anymore, and I was going to act. I told my parents. You know, my mother went to the school, and you know, it got worse for a little while, as it usually does. Right. But you know, parents often come to me and say, "Do you recommend that we talk to the school? You know, our kids are pleading with us not to talk to the school."
Right. That's what I was thinking.
You have to do what's in the best interest of your kid, and ultimately, the short term may not be as important as the long term. Mm-hmm. You know, if a bully will continue to do what they're doing because they don't face opposition that makes them stop. Mm-hmm. You know, sometimes the easiest thing to do is look a bully in the eye and say, you can't talk to me like that. Right. Don't talk to me like that, because they're not expecting the opposition. Right. So when they're constantly getting different opposition, they're going to stop eventually. Mm-hmm. It's not a magic bullet where it's going to work the first time, but you have to go to the school and you have to clue them in, because there has to be opposition at every front that the bully is going to encounter. So, you know, I can't really pinpoint to you the one thing that I did as far as, you know, when I finally said I'm not going to take this anymore. It was a gradual thing, I think, in my case. You know, it was a learning who I really was inside, and it was not only learning who I was, but believing who I was. There's a very big difference between knowing something and believing it. You know, you can know something because mom tells you you're really smart, but you have to believe that you're smart. Right, that's true. You can know that you're talented, but you have to believe that you're talented, and those things have to work together. And sometimes you don't know before you believe. You know, sometimes you kind of clue it into yourself, because there have been many cases we've heard where, you know, oh, you know, my parents never told me I was, you know, special, or I was smart, or, you know, and they've never heard that, and that's a shame in itself. But, you know, there's a definite difference between knowing and believing, and when you believe, that's when you have a new life breathed into you, where you can walk into a situation and say, you know what, I'm not the person they think I am, because I know and I believe that I'm better. Right. So for me, I think that was more of my case. It was knowing what I had been told all along, but then finally starting to believe in it.
Makes sense. You know, as you were talking, again, I went back to when I was bullied as a kid. Two things came up. I thought about rejection, and I thought about acceptance. And I thought about how my life in school paralleled what I was going through at home. Because just hearing you talk about bullying and what kids may feel, premeditated stuff the kids might want to do to other kids. And I think because I was so rejected at home, I was looking for acceptance, so I accepted what I was going through with the bullying. And can I tell you, I don't think I ever told anybody. Because I'm sitting here listening to you going, did I ever tell anybody that I was being bullied? And I think the fear gripped me so much, you know, as a kid. And then when I went home, who was I going to tell? Because I was being abused there. You know what I mean? So I'm just sitting here going, wow, I'm thinking about my own life while you're talking, and acceptance and rejection played such a role. And I think if I would have understood and believed, like you said, in myself, it might have been a little different.
And I think it works both ways. I think it works for the victim, and I think it's also a driving force behind the bully too, because like we talked about the backpack. So, you know, in a lot of cases, the victim becomes the bully, because that's their way of coping, but it's also their way of becoming accepted. You know, instead of, you know, you go home and you're rejected at home. So you go home and you're going to bully somebody because you know there's going to be a group of kids who will now welcome and accept you. And you know what? Sometimes negative attention is better than no attention. So they might not be the right crowd you want to blend with, and you may know they're not the right crowd for you, but being in a pack is better than being alone. And a lot of kids do fall victim to thinking that. Which goes into the whole upstander versus bystander, you know, that we talk about a lot with this. But acceptance and rejection definitely play a big role in this.
It did. And then when I think about my brothers, and I was talking to one of my guests on one of the shows that we had taped, dealing with domestic violence, and I can really see how my brothers kind of went through that too. And I think the passion that people like yourself and other people that I know that we have to change a world, I have to tell you, it's been the driving force. And I want to encourage you and your coalition, keep doing what you're doing. It is making a difference. If I would have known that existed, because my daughters went through that. We went to Half Hollow Hills in Dix Hill, the school district. My daughters went through that. But I didn't know there was an organization like your organization outside of the school system. Because sometimes the kids that were bullying them, they're in the school. Granted, the superintendent got involved. I understood that. But imagine if they had an outside source to go to for extra reinforcement.
And that's
you know what I mean?
Well, that's what we try to convey to the schools.
Okay.
You know, some schools, I won't say a lot, some schools do find us adversarial because we're a third party. They don't want, you know, us kind of what they think is kind of looking around at what's going on and kind of checking on what they're doing. That's not the role we're trying to play.
Okay.
The role we're trying to play is supplemental. We want and encourage schools to take action, but they've got to take the action. But we know that there are limitations to what they can and can't do. And where we want to be viewed as, okay, you can get from A to B. Let us get you from B to C if that's where your limitation is. You know, there's only so many times that a school psychologist can see kids during the school day. You know, and unfortunately, I've heard from a lot of school psychologists that most of their day is not even talking to kids. It's paperwork, and it's this, and it's that. So we recognize that what goes on, and you know that the above all answer is not the school has to get more involved. In some cases, the school's got to get more involved. But in a lot of cases, and in most of the cases we hear, the school is involved, but the parents are running up against the limitations that the schools have to handle it. And you know, so if the school psychologist sees the child in school, great. But now maybe we can refer them to a therapist outside of school so that we can, you know, what happens in school can continue to bridge on after, and we can help the school, you know, get around their limitations.
That's excellent. I want you, if you can, to look into that camera. And if you can encourage a mother, a father, or even a child that's going to watch the show, and give them some words of wisdom that they can feel, knowing that you yourself have gone through it, and they can look at you as that example, like, you know what, if he got through it, I can get through it. If you can say something.
To the kids, I would say it gets better. If there's one person in the world who can understand and relate to what you're going through, it's me. And I know it gets tough, and I know that you can think that there is a very dark tunnel ahead of you, but I promise you that there's light. And if you can't see the light, there's organizations like ours and people like me and my team that will help you find the light. To parents, don't be afraid to have the conversation. You know, the first step in the case where somebody might be thinking your child is a bully, the first step to fixing a problem is admitting that there might be one and figuring out what's motivating that behavior. To the parents of a child who's unfortunately on the receiving end of the bullying, engage the school, work with the school. I do really believe that the majority of schools out there do want to help you, and we can help you navigate those conversations. We can help you with things outside of where the school, has reached its limitations, but have the conversations on both ends. Recognize the warning signs. If you see that your child's behavior has changed, illnesses keep coming up, they don't want to go to school, all things like that. Because if my mom knew some of the things to be looking out for then, maybe I could have been, some of my circumstances might have changed a little sooner. So have the conversations, don't be afraid of them, and bottom line for everybody listening is that there are people out there who want to help you.
Excellent. Listen, thank you for tuning into The Win Show. We want to thank Mr. Salamone from the Long Island Bullying Coalition for being on the show. And listen, this is a wealth of knowledge and some resources that all of us can take heed to. I'll see you next time on The Win Show. And remember what I tell you, the best that we'll ever be is what we allow each other to become. I'll see you next week.